Okay. So welcome everyone to another random walk down Mill Street. I don't know how long it was, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before Pesach. We had a class which was all about a Halakhic controversy about a Cohen who married the daughter of a Jew and whose father was a non-Jew. And we don't have to rehash the whole thing, but we're going to start with a little bit of a review, and we're going to continue the story about who the characters were in that incident, and go on to a few other incidents, early American halachic incidents. At the end, I don't think it's going to be a very long. We're not going to get into as much halachic detail as we did last time. I don't think it's going to be quite as long as last class or the part one, but there are a lot of addendums to this story that I want you to stick around for, and I'm glad that hopefully we'll get a chance to hear from some of the people in this session. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen to my PowerPoint here. And I just want to make sure that you can see my screen. Yes, okay, good. Okay. So this is called the Cohen Controversy Part 2. And we're gonna start off with a review of the case of the Cohen who married the daughter of a Gentile man and a Jewish woman. In November of 1810, a man named Simon Myers Cohen asked the Board of Trustees of Shereth Israel that his Cohen privileges be reinstated. The synagogue had taken them away from him, said you can't do the Duchan, can't be called to the Torah as a Cohen, because he had married the daughter of a Gentile. And we don't need to go into all the halachic details of why that is a problem or isn't a problem. All we need to know is that it's a machloket. Some authorities believe that such a case, the daughter of a Gentile man is pagum lekuhuna, and whatever that means, or essentially pasul. And some say that she is kasher and can marry anyone she wants without any problem. In April 1811, the answer to Simon Myers Cohen was issued. It was a written letter by Israel Ber Kershit, Gershom Edisashis, the Chazan, Israel Ber Kershit, the Parnas of Shereth Israel, and declaring this man, Simon Myers Cohen, to be pasul, removing his privileges as a Kohen. There was a third member of the Beit Din named Emmanuel Carvalho, who abstained for various reasons. And these characters you see on the bottom left. This is Israel Ber Kershit, Gershom Edisashis, and this is Emmanuel Carvalho. I don't have a picture of him. But this is one of his books, and this is his signature from a ketubah I found from, I think, Richmond or Charleston. So that's what happens to Simon Myers. He is unable to have any prerogatives in the synagogue. And he tries again, though, in the year 1815. Israel Ber Kershit is no longer the Parnas. He has moved to Richmond. But Gershom Edisashis is still the Chazan, although he's very, very elderly in 1815. What happens is Simon Myers Cohen writes a letter to the Chacham of Curacao, whose name is Yaakov Lopez de Fonseca. And he receives this letter back in March of 1815. The letter is it's written probably or presumably in Portuguese. Many of the things that Chacham Lopez de Fonseca wrote were in Portuguese or in Hebrew. I'm not sure which it was. And that is translated by a man in New York named Moses Maduro Peixoto and presented to the Board of Trustees. And the summary of it is simple, very simple. He says the exact case that we're talking about, the daughter of a Gentile man and a Jewish woman is kasher. She can marry anybody. If a Cohen marries her, it's totally fine. And that's the summary of the last class. So what we left off with is, who is Simon Myers Cohen? That this controversy erupted. Oh, and I guess the bottom line is, in 1815, the Board of Trustees of Shearith Israel accepts this ruling, reinstates Simon Myers Cohen's privileges, and he can do the Duchan, and he can be called to the Torah for the Kohen Aliyah, and whatever other privileges might be due to him as his status as a Kohen. And so what I pointed out in the last class is that controversy, which took place between 1810 and 1815 in New York, was repeated many times over, because this is a hot topic, an undecided topic in halacha. And so I showed you a case in Rehovot just in the beginning of the 2000s, I think 2007, where you had a Beit Din ruling on the from the Ashkenazic poskim that such a marriage is pasul and cannot be done, and was overturned by a Sephardic Rabbanut Rashi in Yerushalayim, overturning the Ashkenazic Beit Din in Rehovot. And so that's sort of what happened here also. The Sephardic Chacham in Curacao overturned the Ashkenazic ruling of Israel Ber Kershi. Okay. So who is Simon Myers Cohen that this controversy surrounded, and who was his wife? This is just to show you the original documents. On the left is the original 1811 ruling from Kershit with its Halakhic quotations here in Ashkenazic Hebrew. This is the translation of the Chacham de Fonseca's letter. Okay. Who was Simon Myers Cohen, and to whom was he married? So the first place that we see Simon Myers Cohen, it's a little hard because his name is sometimes Simon Myers, sometimes Simon Myers Cohen. Not 100% sure who he is perfectly, but we do know that Gershom Mendy Seixas performed his wedding. That's recorded in Shearith Israel's record books, to a woman named Deborah Solomon. Who was Deborah Solomon? Deborah Solomon was the daughter of Chaim Solomon, the very famous financier who had been in New York and then fled to Philadelphia and helped literally finance the Continental Army and the American Revolution. And obviously, if you think about it, that man was Jewish. Chaim Solomon was Jewish. So Deborah Solomon married to Simon Myers Cohen can't be the problem. And as you'll see here, this is from the genealogies in the American Jewish archives. Simon Myers Cohen married Deborah Solomon, but she dies in 1808. She dies in 1808. And when you go and look up his entry, you'll see he had two wives. Number one, Deborah Solomon, whom he had a few children with. Here on the left, Meyer, Hyman, Ezekiel. And a second wife, who was just listed as question mark. Henry, Samuel, Adelina, Matilda, Theodore, Adelia, Louise, all coming from this second wife. So who was the second wife? That is what we're going to talk about today. And in fact, we do have a copy of his ketubah. It was not done in New York. It was done in Philadelphia. And if you see here on the top right, this ketubah is of Simon Myers to Abby Pettigrew. So we're going to learn about who Abby Pettigrew was. And a few things you can see here. You can, I don't know how well you can read it. I don't know how big it's coming on your screen, but it says that this was done on a certain date. I didn't check the year. Tuf Kuf Ayin on Lag BaOmer of that year. I think it's 1810. And it says his name, Alman, the widower, Ne'elah, Shimon Bar Meir HaKohen. That's his name. The widower, Simon Meyer Cohen. Who is he marrying? Betulta, the young girl, the virgin, Abigail, Bat Abraham Abinu, daughter of Abraham, our forefather, which is a filler for her father's actual name, which was James Pettigrew, just as Bat Abraham Abinu. Now, that is also the way we would refer to a convert, Bat Abraham Abinu, or Bar Abraham Abinu, but she is not a convert. Her mother is Jewish. And who are the Edim on this ketubah? A man named Isaac de Leon, who maybe we'll talk about soon. Jacob I. Cohen, a person who we will definitely talk about a little later, and who performed the wedding. A rabbi named, or a chazan named Yaakov Cohen. That's Jacob Raphael Cohen, who was a chazan in Montreal, then in New York, and then for most of his career was in Philadelphia in the 1790s to the early decades of the 1800s. Okay, so we do know who his second wife was, and that was Abby Pettigrew. So now we have to talk about who Abby Pettigrew was. Abby Pettigrew, this is a little simplified genealogy. Abby Pettigrew appears here. She was born in Easton, Pennsylvania, the daughter of Judith Hart and James Pettigrew. James Pettigrew, as you can see here, I'm not going to get you all the details. James Pettigrew was a lieutenant in the Revolutionary War and was an associate. I think he worked directly under George Washington, or at least at some point during the war. He's a member of the Society of Cincinnati, which is a pretty prestigious veterans association of Revolutionary War veterans. And so he's a big deal. He meets the young girl Abby, Judith Hart, in Pennsylvania, and either has an affair with her or falls in love with her, and ends up marrying her, and has a whole bunch of children, as you can see here: John, James, Hetty, Rachel, Samuel, Abby, and Maria. We're talking about Abby, who married to Simon Myers. We might talk about some of the others a little later. Now we're going to talk about Abby's mother's family. Abby's mother's family. So Abby's mother was Rachel Hart, who married Judith Hart, who married Rachel. Judith Hart married James Pettigrew, but Judith Hart's parents, so Abby's grandparents, were Meyer Hart, Teixeira, and Rachel de Leon. So I want to point out to you, Rachel de Leon is the sister of Isaac de Leon, who signed the ketubah. So if you go back just a second, you'll see one of the witnesses on the ketubah was the bride's great uncle. Bride's great uncle was one of the witnesses. Okay, that's enough for the. Oh, and the other thing to notice is the grandmother's brother-in-law was a man named Reverend Mordecai M. Mordecai, who is going to be the main subject matter of tonight's talk. Okay. Mordecai. Here we have a picture of him. Moses Mordecai was a rabbi in Telz, Lithuania. His son was Mordecai, born in 1727. Exactly when he comes to America is not clear. He first appears in 1760, so he must have come before that, marrying Tzipora de Leon, who we mentioned earlier, the de Leon family, which is, they're some of the founders of Savannah, the Jewish community of Savannah, and the founders of the Jewish community of Easton, Pennsylvania. In fact, I think they're some of the founders of Easton, Pennsylvania, period. And this little picture here, which is quite interesting, comes from a little bit later, significantly later part of his life. But as you can see, it tells you actually the date of his birth. Natus tells January, I guess it's the 16th in the year I don't know what it says, 50 something 27. And then he has a Masonic star on his necklace here. He has glasses which are above his head, which is often the way I wear them. And he has a little paper that says, Vayomer Hashem Yehi Or Vayhi Or. Why? I don't know. But that is a miniature portrait of Mordecai, Moses, Mordecai. And you'll see why we're going to talk about him essentially for most of the night pretty soon. So he is in 1760, he marries this woman in Easton, Pennsylvania. He spends time there, he does business there. He has some letters to Bernard Gratz while he's there in the 1760s and 1770s. He also spends some time in Richmond. He spends some time in Baltimore. He distills wine. He has real estate things. His fortunes go up and down, but more or less he is doing okay. He's solvent. Maybe he's not the richest man, but he's making a living. He is also a very knowledgeable person, and is in 1782 we find him in Philadelphia, living in Philadelphia, and he is asked by Mikveh Israel, which now wants to build its first permanent synagogue building, to write Hebrew letters for the fundraising. And one of them still exists. It's a letter that was written to Mikveh Israel in Suriname, to the community of Suriname on behalf of Mikveh Israel. And the language in that is very rabbinic and very flowery, showing that he had a really good command of Hebrew and probably good rabbinic education. In 1785, Manuel Josephson, the president of Mikveh Israel, and a man named Joseph Karpeles write to Amsterdam a lengthy she'elah, which we are going to read in full, in translation, all about this man. Later on, after that incident, he's found in Baltimore, he's found in Richmond. In 1807, he performs the wedding of his granddaughter. I think that wedding took place in Philadelphia again. And then he dies in 1809 in Baltimore. He has a very interesting life. He is referred to as the Reverend Mordecai Moses Mordecai. Okay, he probably wasn't an actual rabbi, but certainly had rabbinic training and learning. And now we will learn a few incidents about his life, which will relate to the families that we mentioned first. So the first thing here is an incident that took place in 1782, 1783. And we're going to read on the left. These are from the minutes of Mikveh Israel. I have them here in this printed version, but you can actually see online the handwritten version as well. We'll take a look at the ketubah on the right later. At a meeting of the Adjunta in 1783, the Parnas presented a letter from the Chazan, which he read, and moved, based on the letter, that Mr. M. Mordecai, that is our Mordecai Moses Mordecai, and a certain man named Mr. Israel Meyer be sent for. They came to the meeting. This is all like being written in real time. They had a meeting of the Board of Trustees. They read this letter from the Chazan. They said, oh, go get, this has to do, this is a Halakhic issue. Go get our Halakhic experts, Moses Mordecai, Mordecai Moses Mordecai, and this other guy, Israel Meyer. Bring them here. They do. Mordecai and Meyer attended, and the Parnas informed them of the point in question. Can Mr. Jacob Cohen, that is Jacob I. Cohen, who we saw earlier, that Jacob Cohen marry the widow of Mordecai? That's a different Moses Mordecai. So just to be, why is Mordecai, our person's name, Mordecai Moses Mordecai? Why does he use such a long name? Because when he came to America and he came to Philadelphia, there was already a person there named Moses Mordecai. And so Mordecai Moses didn't want to be confused with Moses Mordecai, so he appended his grandfather's name. So he went by Mordecai, Moses, Mordecai. And the other person was named Moses Mordecai. Still confusing, but at least there is a way to distinguish them. So the question is, a certain Mr. Moses Mordecai wants to marry a certain Mr. Jacob Cohen wants to marry the widow of a man named Mordecai, Moses Mordecai. Is that a problem? Not that you could tell from here, because a Cohen can marry a widow, can't marry a divorcee, can't marry a convert, can marry a widow. But what is not said here is that the widow of Mordecai, Mr. Mordecai, was a convert who had moved from England to America and married this man and lived perfectly halachically, apparently. But now, after her husband had died, this man, Jacob Cohen, wants to marry her. And Gershom Seixas says to the board of trustees of Mikveh Israel, I don't think this is a kosher. They bring in their experts, which includes our Mr. Mordecai, Moses Mordecai, and they asked him the question. After they debated some time, what's missing here is they bring in a third person, Mr. Da Costa. So they have a Beit Din. After hearing the full hearing of the dinim, they all agreed to adjourn and bring Mr. Cohen there for the reading of the answer. When they do so, Mr. Da Costa and Mr. Mordecai proved by the din that it is contrary to our law to suffer such a marriage. They tell this to the groom. The Parnas then requested to know the determination of the junta, which is interesting procedurally. They've already been the Beit Din gave them this ad hoc Beit Din gave them their ruling, but now the board has to vote on it. The board votes, and they say, this is what they're going to tell the Chazan, and here's what they wrote to the Chazan. In answer to your letter of August 24th, we now inform you, this is at the bottom, that you are not to marry Mr. Jacob Cohen to Mrs. Mordecai. Neither are you to be present at such a wedding, and you are hereby strictly forbidden to mention the said Kohen or his wife's name in any respect whatsoever in the synagogue. And they sign it. As you might tell from the right-hand side, not much later, a few months later, Mr. Cohen decides, despite what is the ruling of the Board of Trustees of Mikveh Israel is, he is going to marry this widow who is a convert, contrary to what he was told was the deen. And he does so. But he doesn't just do so in a civil ceremony. He marries her with a religious ceremony. And that religious ceremony includes a ketubah, which is right here on this right here screen. And to show you exactly that they knew what they were doing, I'm not sure you can read it so carefully here, but let's see where the names are. Let's see if we can see the names. There they say, here's the name of the groom, Yaakov Bar Yehoshua HaKohen. And what is his bride? Almana or Armilata, which is another way of saying a widow. Marat Esther Bat Abraham. Esther Bat Abraham. She's a Bat Abraham. She is a convert. They're not hiding it at all. And so that is what that they get married. And who witnesses this ketubah? Mordecai Sheftal comes from the south. We could talk about him another day. A man named Israel Jacobs, another person also for another day, and Chaim Solomon. Chaim Solomon, the person who we spoke earlier, the financier of the revolution. These people consciously disobeyed what was done, what was ruled by Mikveh Israel, and went ahead with this wedding despite its impropriety according to halacha. Sounds like Reverend Seixas Machmir. Yeah, I think that is relatively, well, he's following the halacha anyway. Machmir, I don't know, he's following the halacha. Okay, but also he had to submit to the ruling of the board. It just shows you where the real power is coming from. But as you see, despite the power of the board of Mikveh Israel, it didn't actually do anything. They got married anyway. And so they didn't really effectively prevent anything from happening. They just made a lot of stress on a lot of people. So let's see what happened. So the reason I read this story is for a couple of reasons. One, Mordecai, Moses Mordecai was consulted in a halachic fashion by Mikveh Israel to give them the din, meaning they relied on it. They didn't have a rabbi. They had the chazan who said, hey, I don't think this is kosher. Let's ask someone with some training. They brought in this fellow, Moses Mordecai of Tels, Lithuania, who was in their midst and who was rabbinically trained. They went over it. They determined the law. And so he's being consulted as a halachic, for halachic basis, for din, by the community of Mikveh Israel. We're going to see it turn around on its head after this. Okay, this I already told you. The response after the Mikveh Israel's ruling was that Cohen did it anyway in an act of defiance, and they did it knowingly. They did not follow the ruling of Mikveh Israel's board. So now we're going to move forward to another story that happens within 3 years of that incident. Within 3 years of that incident, in 1885, Manuel Josephson, who is then the president of Mikveh Israel, writes a very long she'elah in Yiddish, really German, to the Chacham, the Ashkenazic chief rabbi of Amsterdam, named Saul Lowenstein. And that letter is in the Mikveh Israel archives. I couldn't get a copy of the original, a little difficult. It'll probably be sent to me at some point, and I'll send you a picture of it, but it was transcribed. And so that's what you see here on the right. We're not going to read it in the Hebrew or the Yiddish. We're going to read it in translation. But I just want to show you the beginning. It starts off in Hebrew. L'rom ma'alat kvod Adonenu hagaon ha'meforsam. It really goes on. Or Yisrael, Moreno harav Shaul, Av Bet Din, Verosh Metivta Bekahal Ashkenazim be'Amsterdam. Yarich Yamim, Mamlachto, it's all in Hebrew. Ha'ma'aseh shahaya, that happened 2 years ago. L'arech Bet Shanim, Kach haya. Umitam shero, this is what I read. Umitam sherov b'nei medinot hayam einam b'nei Torah ve'einam mevinim bilshonenu hakidosha. Anu rotzim lehaparnas v'tovei ha'ir yikra'u et divarenu elu lachen anu motziim hadavar lifnei kvod Adonenu bilshon Ashkenaz. So he says, he starts off in Hebrew. He says, we're going to write to you. In Hebrew, they write to the rabbi, I'm sorry that I'm going to switch languages to German because I want the board of trustees in Mikveh Israel to understand to be able to read the letter we're writing to you. So I can't write it in Hebrew because they don't know Hebrew. So I'm going to write it in German. Obviously, the German they're writing is Yiddish, Lashon Ashkenaz, which is German in Hebrew characters. And then it says, Uz Hut, that goes into the German. We'll read it in translation. There are places where this story has been abridged, and I could just tell it to you, but there are so many little details that I think are interesting that I just decided we'll read the whole letter in translation from beginning to end, and then we'll talk about it. Philadelphia, Sunday, 9th of Nisan, 1785. To exalted excellency, this is the part we read in Hebrew, Rabbi Saul of Amsterdam. This inquiry relates to an event that took place some 2 years ago. Since the Jews here don't know Torah and don't understand Hebrew, I have to write it to you in German. The daughter of a Jewish resident of Easton, Pennsylvania, was seduced by a Gentile man. She became pregnant out of wedlock and was married to this man by a minister, meaning a non-Jewish minister, obviously, according to their ritual. That is to say, she did not convert out of Judaism, but was married to the custom of the Goyim. All of this took place secretly, without her father's knowledge. Soon after her father found out about the affair, he expelled his daughter from his house. And then the writers of Shelah wrote, as is proper and correct. But the mother and other members of the family were desirous to restore peace between the father and his daughter and her Gentile husband. Their efforts proved futile. So what did the mother do? she wrote a letter to Rabbi Mordechai Moses Mordechai of Philadelphia, a learned man and an uncle of the young woman, right? So the young woman's mother had a sister who was married to Reverend Mordechai Moses Mordechai of Telz. Reverend Mordechai immediately journeyed to the town of Easton, and it is common knowledge that from the day that he arrived in Easton, the young woman and her Gentile husband have returned to her father's house and lived there in affection and harmony. So he came and made shalom between the family. Somehow, whatever he did enabled the daughter and her Gentile husband to move back in with her father. Sometime later, the father moved to Philadelphia, father of this girl, but the daughter and her Gentile husband still live to this day, 1785, in Easton. The husband comes here on business often, sometimes alone, sometimes with his wife. They always stay in her father's house, where they are most welcome. The son the woman has given birth to, at that point they only had one son, has not been circumcised, because the father wants to raise him until he is mature enough to decide whether he should accept Judaism on his own or not. That's an interesting fact. So they had a son. The son did not have a Brit Milah, because the father, the Gentile father, wants him to be able to choose what religion he wants to be in. To resume to our original subject, since Reverend Mordecai's visit to the town of Easton, reports have persisted to this day throughout the province, I guess in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, that Mordecai secretly performed a Jewish marriage, giving kiddushin between the young woman and her Gentile husband to her father's satisfaction. How did he get the father to be okay with what was going on? He married them Jewishly. The same night, the father served that whatever this alleged incident occurred, the same night the father served a wedding meal at which Mordecai as well as the young couple were present. Such is the information, although Mordecai and the other family members completely deny the account of his having performed the marriage ceremony. But they can never deny his role as the peacemaker between the father and the young couple, nor his presence at that festive meal. Okay, so we get the basics of the background of the story. Mr. Pettigrew has an affair with Abby. The father finds out, kicks her out of the house. They're married. They have a son. The mother wants to make shalom, calls in her brother-in-law, this learned fellow, Reb Mordecai, Moses Mordecai. He comes, he makes peace. He does something that appeases the father, and there is shalom. And since that day till now, the family is all together. And there are rumors that Mordecai did something wrong, that he married this couple in a Jewish ceremony, even though the husband was not Jewish. Subsequently, a Jewish man named Barnett Levy, a resident of Easton, came to Philadelphia. And what's not said here is that Barnett Levy is another brother-in-law of Mordecai Moses Mordecai, as well as another brother-in-law of the mother of Abby Pettigrew, Rachel Hart, which is interesting because he's a member of the family. But he also had debts and other arguments with other members of the family, so he's a little bit on the outs. But he is a man from Easton, comes to Philadelphia. Now we're back to the letter. He chanced to come to a house where there were 3 members of our community present. One was the Parnas of the Eastern community, and the other 2 are respectable members of our board. This afforded an opportunity for discussing the matter of the marriage allegedly performed by Mordecai. And in brief, Barnett Levy testified before 3 gentlemen that he was present in the same room with Reb Mordecai, a Jewish woman, her Gentile husband, and no one else in the room except for him. Reb Mordecai read the ketubah made out in the name of the young woman and her Gentile bridegroom. Mordecai explained the content of the ketubah to the bridegroom in English and asked him, "Do you believe in what is stated here?" To which the Gentile responded, "Yes." Mordecai then performed the kiddushin and persuaded Barnett Levy, a man of scant learning, to sign the ketubah as a witness, and he signed. This is the substance of Barnett Levy's testimony. This testimony was taken on a Saturday night. There was no opportunity for a formal hearing by the congregation and the presence of Mordecai, meaning they accused him of this terrible thing of performing a marriage of an intermarriage, not in his presence. They just took their testimony. And on the next day, Barnett Levy went on his way to his next destination, and the three gentlemen who had heard his statement promised to repeat the same testimony again. They got him to promise that he would come back again and tell it to Mordecai at his next visit, which doesn't happen, by the way. Whereupon the congregation was convened, which I think they mean the board of trustees. Mordecai was summoned and said, "Do you know Barnett Levy of Easton?" "Yes, I know him well," Mordecai replied. "It's his brother-in-law." "Is he a good Jew?" "Yes, he's a good Jew and a pretty decent fellow." The Kahal continued the interrogation with similar questions relating to Barnett Levy, all of which Mordecai replied favorably. He doesn't know what's coming. Finally, the Kahal mentioned the allegations concerning the Kiddushin, together with the testimony given by Barnett Levy. Mordecai responded vehemently with solemn vows that the alleged Kiddushin story is a pure fabrication. Moreover, Barnett Levy is disqualified under Jewish law as a witness because of his abhorrent character. He defiles the Sabbath and eats treif, and many other shortcomings. How quickly it changes from, is he a good Jew? Yeah, the guy doesn't keep Shabbat, he doesn't eat kosher food. Very quickly, he starts impugning his character. In brief, the Kahal agreed to delegate two members of the synagogue board, Mr. Myers and Mr. Nunez, to request us, that's Josephson and a man named Karpeles, on behalf of the Kahal, to offer our opinion concerning this affair. So the congregation, the board of trustees, came to me, Mr. Emmanuel Josephson, and another fellow whose name is Karpeles, to say what we should do is what Mordecai did kosher, not kosher? Is he guilty of doing something improper? Or is he innocent? And if he is guilty, what should the penalty be? We submitted our opinion to the Kahal in English. We take the liberty of enclosing here with our judgment in Yiddish. Okay, that's but basically they said that he was guilty, but okay, we'll get there. And our Kahal has complied with our decision. But Reb Mordecai is protesting against our finding, claiming that it is in violation of rabbinic law. So you get what they're asking him? They're actually not asking him, they're not asking this rabbi in Amsterdam to decide the case for them. They're trying to see if what they did procedurally is correct. And here Mordecai is objecting to the fact that these two people, Manuel Josephson and Karpeles, issued a ruling against him. Why? Because the story of his allegedly granting Kiddushin is false. The testimony was taken from only one witness, as opposed you need two witnesses in Jewish law. Even the one witness is disqualified because of his character. The witness is further disqualified because of close family relationship, because he's his brother-in-law. The testimony was taken in Reb Mordecai's absence. The testimony was taken without him being able to question the witness. Also a no-no. So Reb Mordecai is giving a very legalistic response to the decision that Josephson had made, saying, what you said is wrong. The testimony should never have been allowed because it is disqualified for a number of Jewish legal reasons. The three gentlemen who took the testimony are not sufficiently qualified scholars. It's another reason. Moreover, two of these three gentlemen are also disqualified because of family relationships. They're all connected to each other, so they can't actually be witnesses either. And that is what Mordecai's arguments have been. In view of the above, the Kahal turned to us, whereupon the council of the Kahal further resolved that we place the entire matter before your excellency, as well as before your brother-in-law, someone else in The Hague. Okay. In the meantime, they want to know if what we did in the Horat Sha'ah was correct. We're asking you if what we did was correct. Okay. We therefore take the liberty of submitting a full description of the case, blah, 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 blah. We pray and trust, therefore, this will not be too burdensome for you, and hope that you'll give us your answer in the earliest moment. Our eyes and the eyes of our entire community are turned to you for this decision concerning Reb Mordecai. If guilty, what shall his penalty be? Because our judgment was rendered only on a temporary basis until Barnett Levy's next visit. We are anxiously awaiting your authoritative reply because this matter touches the very essence of our faith, especially in this country where everyone does as he pleases. Most deplorably, many of our people, including some Kohanim, marry Gentile women. And they're certainly here referring to what happened just the year previously, which we saw earlier, where Cohen married a convert, despite the board's express prohibition of it. They consult so-called scholars, thoroughly corrupt individuals who flagrantly profane the name of heaven and who contrive erroneous legalistic loopholes. The heart aches even at the mere mention of such goings-on, let alone to witness them with our own eyes. Yet the Kahal has no authority to restrain or punish anyone except the nominal penalty of denying them synagogue honors or of withholding from them sacred rites. That is basically what happened. What happened was Josephson and Karpeles tell the board of Mikveh Israel, don't let Mordecai get any honors in the synagogue. He should be like in Cherem until we can have more information. And then they asked this Sheila of Amsterdam what they should do. So that and the thing that's always quoted by every historian is this line where they talk about describe America as a country where everyone does as he pleases. The synagogue has no power, has no authority. All they can do is say, don't give an aliyah to this person. That is the extent of the power the community has. And then they addend into the letter. It's actually written into the letter. If you were to look at the original, you'd see it starts off in a separate place. Another incident relating to Reb Mordecai. So they had written the whole She'elah, and they added something new after they had written that whole thing. Last Tuesday, the 5th of Nisan, a man named Benjamin Klava died. He left a Gentile wife, whom he had married by a judge in a civil marriage, and 2 daughters. Sometime after his marriage, Benjamin Klava, who was regarded as a knowledgeable Jew, lost his sight and was confined to his house. His wife provided him with food and other necessities. Occasionally, some people would send kosher food. About a year before his death, Benjamin Klava summoned some Jews to his home, and he recited before them the ritual confession. He said vidui. He knew he was sick. He knew he was going to die. He said the vidui. But he still lived with this Gentile wife. Last Tuesday, the sudden news of his demise became known, and there was no Jew with him at his death. The question of his burial precipitated a turmoil in our community. This is just, right while he's writing the She'elah, an incident occurred. The Parnas, with the council and most members of the community, convened to decide on a ruling on this matter, and it was agreed to leave the decision to the local Beit Din, which he's a part of, the writer of the letter is a part of, in accordance with Torah law. Moses Nathan and we served as this Beit Din, and we instructed, here's the instruction. We ordered that the deceased be interred in a corner of the cemetery without ritual ablution. Don't do a tahara. Don't wash the body. Without shrouds. Don't dress him in tachrichim. And without any funeral rites. No service. Just go dig the thing, put him in the ground, and that's it. Only 4 boys should carry him to the burial ground and handle the interment. Meaning, they want to bury him because he's a Jewish person and they don't, but he left the community, so he's in Cherem, so no funeral, no tahara, no tachrichim, just go and bury him. That's what they ruled. And then they added, whoever doesn't listen to this shall be debarred and excluded from sacred rites until he submits to a penalty imposed by the Kahal. They gave a strong ruling. You got to listen to this ruling, otherwise you'll be in Cherem too. The Parnas then visited the home of the deceased to check whether there were any heedless people attending to him. And he found there some impudent, light-minded people with Reb Mordechai, the very person we were writing to you about. Parnas warned them in the presence of Reb Mordechai, don't do it. But Reb Mordechai disregarded the warnings of the Parnas. On the contrary, he contrived erroneous rules, and they proceeded to wash the body, dress it in shrouds, just what the Parnas had said they were going to do. They did as they pleased. The Kahal will shortly decide on these matters to take against these people. Okay. All right, that's the story. I don't have to finish. You get the idea. So they wrote a Sheila about this weird marriage story between James Pettigrew and Abby Hart, Abby Teixeira. And as a result, they didn't know what they knew that Mordecai had done something wrong, but they couldn't prove it because the testimony was weak. They asked the Sheila what to do. While that's happening, while they're writing this very Sheila, Mordecai gets into more trouble by disobeying the ruling about the burial of Benjamin Klava. He decides that it's okay to bury him and to give him a tahara, to wash the body and to dress the body and to bury him properly with a funeral service. That is Mordecai, Moses, Mordecai. We do not know what the answer was by Saul Lowenstamm. The only thing we know is that the congregation paid someone to translate something from the Dutch, from Amsterdam, a lot of money, so it was probably answered. We just don't have a copy of it anymore. But we do know that Mordecai leaves Philadelphia. So my guess is that they rule against him and they tell him that he can't stay there, and he put him in Cherem essentially, and he leaves and he goes to Baltimore and then Richmond and back to Baltimore. So that is the story. Whether there was a Jewish wedding performed between James Pettigrew and Judith Hart, I don't know. Whether Mordecai was a character, we do know. He was certainly a character. He was involved in so many controversies. He must have been very strong personality. But what happens to the Pettigrews? So James Pettigrew dies just a few years after having married Judith Hart. They had 6 children: John, James, Hetty, Rachel, Samuel, Abby, and Marion. And then he dies in 1793, and all these children continue to live with their mother and in their grandfather's home, basically as Jews. And it's interesting. We don't really know what happened, but my guess is there is some kind of compromise made, because all the girls grow up and marry Jewish people, and all the boys don't. The boys do not stay within the fold. The girls all do. So if one had to imagine what Mordecai was doing there, he probably got some kind of agreement to be made by Pettigrew that the girls would stay Jewish. And the boys would do as they said, when they came of age, to do what they would want, whether they wanted to stay in Judaism or not. And then he died. So what happens to the descendants of these people? And it happens to be that one of the children was Samuel Pettigrew, right here. You can see here. He was the first mayor elected by popular election in the city of Pittsburgh. The first mayor that was not named by the city council, but rather was elected by the people directly, was Samuel Pettigrew, a Jew, sort of. He was definitely Jewish by birth. I don't think he was thought of himself as a Jew, perhaps. Unclear. But that's him, his picture of him here. Mayor Pettigrew was the last mayor named by the city council, the first elected by popular election. During his tenure, this is from the city of Pittsburgh website. During his tenure, the waterworks began to draw water from the Allegheny River. So he did some things. They had a cholera epidemic. Gas works were established. The first public school opened. So he was a busy guy. And they hired a police force right in the beginning of the growth of Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh. And what else? Who else came from this wedding of Pettigrew and Judith Hart? Actually, I want to pause here because I realize I skipped something. So remember our story in New York with Simon Myers Cohen, and he marries this woman named Abby Pettigrew, and she's the daughter of James Pettigrew, and they have this whole Halakhic she'elah. What's very interesting is that Mordecai was on the other side of that, on the Machmir side, on the prohibiting side, when asked by Mikveh Israel what to do about Jacob I. Cohen, who wanted to marry the widow Mordecai, who was a convert. He said, no, you can't do it. Halakha says you can't do it. But somehow he gets into hot water when he intervenes in his niece's wedding to James Pettigrew. He does something that rumors were swirling about, but he does something to make the family okay with the fact that he was a Gentile and she was Jewish. And I find it interesting that the union of the daughter of that marriage is then brought into question in New York by Gershom Mendy, who was already there a generation ago before, having to listen to the ruling of Mordecai. And now Mordecai's grandniece is being disqualified to marry her husband, Simon Myers. They get overruled by remembering the original story, they get overruled in New York by the Chacham in Curacao saying that it's kosher, but that's what happened, sort of like a turnabout. Okay, we have one last thing to talk about tonight, and that is the descendants of another daughter of James Pettigrew. So we are privileged here in this class to have people in our regular attendees of these sessions who are actually descendants of early generations of American Judaism. And one of them who comes very frequently is Linda Rawson, who I'm going to ask to speak in a few moments, who lives in Santa Fe, and her son Nicholas, who became members of our congregation during COVID because we had some online programming that appealed to them, and even though they live not here in New York, during COVID, they were able to connect to our programming and appreciated it, became members, and come almost every week, or almost every class, not every single one, but almost. And after this class about the Cohen controversy, I got an email from Linda. Dear Reverend Edinger, James Pettigrew is my fourth great-grandfather. I'm attaching a photograph of a pendant that has been passed down in my family since James Pettigrew had it made for Judith, according to family legend. I received it from my great aunt, who received the pendant along this chain of people. Judith Hart, Hetty Pettigrew, right? This is James, that's the sister of Abby, who was our original story last week. Samuel Pettigrew Anchor, that is this man here. Samuel Pettigrew Anchor to, I guess, another Samuel Pettigrew Anchor who was not shown here. And that was then given to Samuel Pettigrew Jr., sorry. And that was given to Catherine, who is Linda Rawson's great aunt. Frances Eleanor is Linda Rawson's grandmother. Catherine was her great aunt, and gave that pendant that was handed down in the family to Linda. So now let's see if Linda is still here. Yep. Okay, let's see if Linda will talk to us a little bit. Hi, Linda, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. I'm going to stop my share, although I do like, let's take one last look at this pendant before we close the share. Can you tell us the story as you were told about the pendant and what you knew about the pedigree ancestry in your family growing up?
Pretty much what you have already set forth. I mean, not in as much detail, obviously, not all the halakhic ins and outs, but about the story of their elopement and the family controversy and the whole rest of it. And that they had one element that was passed down that wasn't in your talk is that they had a very good marriage. They were very devoted to each other. You know, who knows what's true after all this time.
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if there's any way to know more about it than what was written in Josephson's responsa or question. He says that not only did Moses Mordecai deny having performed a Jewish wedding, so did the family. So I was wondering if there was ever any tradition about whether there was a Jewish wedding performed or not in your family.
I was told that they were good Jews. Now, you know, that's hearsay centuries later.
Right.
And, you know, families lie for their own purposes. So
I think the story, I think there is no reason to impugn the reputation of Mordecai Mordecai, because at least one scholar has put into question the relationship of the brother-in-law and said that he had reason to dislike Moses Mordecai because he owed him money and had other issues with him. So I think that, who knows, you know, maybe what he did is he made shalom. He figured out a way that the family could operate together.
And we're still Jewish, right?
All those kids are Jewish, completely Jewish, and they're still Jewish. And Linda, you're here proof of it. You're 100% proof of it. It's really quite amazing. And Nicholas, I think your son is also here. You can ask Nicholas just to say hello. I don't know if he wants to or not.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Nicholas. It's really an honor to have you guys in this class, in particular in this week, but always, because we're talking about your ancestors. And I hope I did them proud, or I hope I did you proud. But yeah, it's a real honor. So thank you very, very much. And thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop the recording and ask everybody to stay on and ask any questions they may have. And let's see how I do that. Let's see.